All right. In the interest of time, I guess we can just start with the people that are interested in doing this. Hi, Mr. Stanley. How is Livingston?
Okay, sir, how are you?
I'm well. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I don't know, is Livingston as hot as Lusaka or it's much cooler there?
Sir, he is rough.
Okay.
Severa was very hot, around 40 degrees, 39.
Yeah. Okay. That's okay. All right. So I think we can start. This is 1606.
Sure.
I was just telling Miss Chama that we're going to start as soon as one person, at least one person who we are certain is going to be submitting, joins us. But just to mention that I sent out that email because I've noticed as I'm going through draft dissertations, for those of you that have submitted with dissertations, I've noticed striking similarity in the issues that have come up. And so this is meant to help those that are hopefully going to be submitting before the end of the month, and indeed those that may be submitting in the next coming weeks here. But just a reminder, really, that and maybe we can add something here, say sessional dates, to remind those of us that may not have a copy of the sessional dates here. I wonder if we can. I think I should have the session date somewhere. Let me just see here. And maybe in administration or something. Yes. So a reminder, if you look at the current session dates, right? Or this is the document that I have in my possession. I imagine most of you, if not all of you, have access to this. You will notice that I believe this is interesting. So graduation week, all right? Graduation week for next year is in May, right? So towards the end of May. You notice it's between the 20th and the 24th of May. Yeah, so in the week of the 20th. And usually what this means is if you look at your calendar, you begin to realize that between now and the time when graduation is slated to take place, there's quite a number of activities that are supposed to take place if you have intentions of graduating in May. I had sent out an email indicating that the last conversation I had with a postgraduate coordinator hinted at the fact that if a student wishes to graduate next year, which is May of 2024, they will have to make sure that they submit the final manuscript before the end of December. And the reason why you need to submit your manuscript before the end of December is because between submission and graduation, there's a couple of activities that take place, right? So the manuscript, once submitted, has to be sent to 3 supervisors. 3 examiners, right? The examiners ideally need time to read through those manuscripts. Now, usually the examiners will be given, let's say, minimum of about a month or something, but sometimes the examination process can take as long as 2 months, right? So assuming you submit in December, the thinking here is that the examiners will send through their reports, the so-called examiners' reports, by February, hopefully, right? And that's a good thing because when they send back the manuscript, or when they send through the reports, the so-called examiners' reports, what will happen is they don't send them directly, so an oral exam is scheduled. It is after the oral exam that you're given the examiner's reports. Typically, the examiner's reports will be accompanied by a detailed report from the examiner highlighting major issues with your manuscript, things that you need to take into account as you're revising the manuscript. So assuming this takes place in February, right? You get feedback by February, hopefully postgraduate coordinator the Emily's postgraduate coordinator will organize the oral exams, let's say by March, right? Giving you maybe part of March and April for you to make the corrections. Once you make the corrections, depending on the outcome from each of the three examiners, the corrections would ideally need to be sent back to the examiner so that they verify that the issues that were raised in their respective reports were addressed by the student. Now the major takeaway point here is that the reason why you need to submit by December is because there's so much going on, right? So if you delay in submitting this by December, there's no guarantee that you'd be graduating in May, for instance, or next year really, because we only have one graduation session last time I checked, right? Unless if things change here. So anyway, so that's the thing about the session dates, right? And I think I've kind of touched on the examination process to a certain extent, but it turns out that the examination process is outlined in the DRGS guidelines. There's a document that I've discussed with all of you at length, and in fact, at the very beginning, when I'm interacting with students, one of the very first things I would do is I would tell them to download this document. Right? It's an 86. It's 86 pages in length. Ideally, the so-called regulations for postgraduate training. This is a 2015 version. It's, by the way, it's available on the website. So if you go to the UNZA website, so if you go to graduate.unza.zm, is it graduates? I don't know. I keep mixing things up here. Yeah, it's graduate actually. So if you go to graduate.unza.zm, subdomain really is linked to the Directorate of Research and Graduate Studies. If you go under downloads, you will have access to this handbook. For those of you that perhaps may have forgotten or did not bookmark this thing, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share the direct link to the document itself. All right. If you go through that document, you'll notice that there are certain important sections. Chief amongst them is, I want to start with, maybe I can search for examination here or something. Let's see if we can find the section I'm looking for. So for instance, they will outline exactly how examiners are going to be selected, right? Let's see if we can find the part that we're looking for here. Not quite assurance, but we're looking for the examination process. Not procedure for submitting the proposal. There we go. So if you look at section 10, you notice the details here in terms of the examination of masters. And, is it master's dissertation, master's doctoral thesis here? What you want to pay particular attention to, I believe it's all of you here, is the part that says taught masters and dissertation. Fortunately, for you guys, I don't know if Malaysia has joined us. I'm working with, but I didn't extend an invitation because it's only just started. There's a student that I'm working with who is pursuing a research-only master's. The thing with a research-only master's is because you're working towards a thesis, there's an external examiner that is co-opted. But in terms of the examination for the taught master's dissertation, which is what Emily students I'm working with are pursuing, it's a lot easier because all the three examiners are internal. So they are from within UNZA. And because they are from within UNZA, it's usually easier to make follow-ups if there are delays. So we don't really expect there to be major delays, although usually, because this is a busy period, some examiners will tend to delay in terms of submitting the dissertation. So anyways, you notice here that there are guidelines in terms of how the internal examiners are going to be selected here. As we can skip here and go to, if you want, you can go through the criteria that outlines exactly how these are selected as well. Usually though, they will pay particular attention to the skill set or the experience of the examiners or something. So that's that. And then if you look at the other part that's interesting here is, I'm just going to skip to the part that's tagged as guidelines for examining theses and dissertations. The game is rigged, ladies and gentlemen. Here, it turns out that the examination process is transparent. Now, you may not know who your examiners are until after you've been examined, but in terms of what they are required to look out for, all of those details are in this document, right? So you will notice that they will try and see if your abstract is comprehensive, right? This is the reason why for people like Mr. Chisale, for instance, and Ms. Kasonde and Ms. Tembo, you'll notice that I've made comments to your abstract relative to these, right? So if there was an important aspect of the abstract that was missing, I've highlighted that thing is missing. And my comments are relative to what the examiners are going to be looking out for. Yeah, if you look at this, an abstract is considered to be comprehensive if you indicate what specifically was investigated, why it was investigated, so the problem, the motivation, how it was investigated, the methodology, the major findings of the investigation, that would be the results, the implications of the findings, conclusions and recommendations. Yeah, so you want to make sure that you thoroughly go through 10.7 here. Sometimes those comments I've made really are meant to make you think, right? It's not like when I've made a comment, then you should make a change, right? If you feel you can justify why something was done the way it was done, ignore the comment or just respond to my comment. And I'm sitting here looking at you, Mr. Chisale here. Yeah. So other things that they'll look out for here is in your introduction, they'll try and see if your problem statement is appropriate, right? They'll check for the main objectives and the specific objectives. Yeah. They will check for the theoretical grounding associated with your work here. This is one of the reasons why, for almost all of you, at the very beginning, right, I kept on pushing. What theoretical framework have you chosen, right? There are some of you that decided to ignore that, and you notice that in your dissertation, as you're submitting the final manuscript, that issue has come back again, right? So there's that. But anyways, you notice that there's other important things here, like adequacy of your literature review, for instance, right? Comment I mostly like adding to literature review is I almost always mention that the literature review is not supposed to be a data dump, right? It's supposed to be a discourse, a discussion, a critique of existing literature. And a critique relative to related work means that you are supposed to identify the gaps, if any, explicitly indicate the similarities that exist, right? Or at a bare minimum, state exactly how the related work is linked to what you're doing. In some instances, related work may be useful as background information. You must state that. Anyways, you notice that in terms of the methodology, they'll check the coherence of reasoning advanced to justify the research paradigm followed, for instance. Right? So the things that they'll look out for, if you notice here again, things like the research design that you adopted, sampling procedures, sampling site, sample size, inclusion and exclusion criteria associated with the participants in your studies, right? All of these things, if you are paying attention, you notice these are things I was commenting on, right? I can't quite remember if it was you, Mr. Chisale, or perhaps Ms. Tembo, or maybe Ms. Kasonde, but I was pointing at things like the methodology must include the following things, and these are the issues that I was highlighting here. adequacy of presentation of findings. For some of you, I've explicitly mentioned that the way you've presented your results are not really at the level of a master's program, right? And the reason I'm doing that is, you see, if you look at your manuscript, there are certain important areas that examiners are going to focus on. Chief amongst them is obviously the results, right? Because the conclusions of whatever it is you did in your research, in your dissertation, are primarily going to come from your results, right? Now, so if your results are superficial here, it's going to be a bit of a problem here, right? So there's that. And then there's adequacy of the discussion as well. Yeah, so that would be your chapter 5 for those of you that have decided to structure your dissertation in such a way that you've separated your chapter 4, which is the results, and your chapter 5, which is the discussion. And then finally, there's the appropriateness of the conclusions and the recommendations. Very important here. I've seen this over and over again, right? In the 6 years I've been at the UNZA here, the common things that will come up is students listing recommendations that have nothing to do with what they did or the results, right? Because your conclusions have to be rooted in your findings, right? Your recommendations must be relative to your results. You just can't recommend something that has nothing to do with your findings, right? People are going to raise flags here when you do that. So anyways, so in terms of the examination process, that's essentially it, right? Now, what I was doing as well is I decided to mask out a sample report, right? When the examiners are preparing a report, there's two things that are going to happen here. They'll prepare something like this, right? This is in your guidelines as well. There's a PG Form 6 here. This is a sample PG Form 6. You will not know who this is, but you notice that this is Master of Library Information Science here, right? What each of the 3 examiners will be asked to do is to rate, right? To make a recommendation based on the dissertation that you're going to submit. Is it a pass without corrections? This is very rare, right? So should the student pass, without making any corrections? I'm sure it's possible, but I've not seen this happen, right? Should the student pass subject to minor corrections? Ideally, this is what we strive for. It's always nice when you have a student, get feedback by way of almost all the examiners hinting at the fact that their final rating is that the dissertation is a pass subject to minor corrections. And you notice, like, minor corrections means that maybe there are a few issues that have been identified relative to typographical errors that you'd have made, maybe stylistic errors, right? Issues to do with formatting, for instance. Maybe somebody will say, oh, your headings are not consistently formatted. Grammatical errors, for instance. And this is the reason why you notice that maybe some of you were sitting there and wondering why I was perhaps coming out as though I was being trivial, right? By making comments like your headings are inconsistently formatted. Or I think in the case of Adrian, I think I've commented things like you don't put a full stop in your headings, for instance. I am trying to avoid a situation where one of the 3 examiners is going to get back to you and say there are a lot of issues with the style, right? Or with the formatting of the document. You understand this? In some instances, you have a pass subject to moderate corrections. Again, this is okay. This is a common rating, actually. In most of these exams that I've been a part of, it's usually a C, right? A pass subject to moderate correction. So it could be a situation where maybe the structure of the dissertation makes it extremely difficult for readers to be able to follow through with what you did, right? So they'll say, move content that is in the results to the methodology. And this is the reason why, again, I think I've done this with both Mr. Chisale and Ms. Kasonde, where I've mentioned that you're presenting information that is meant to be in the methodology in the results section, right? So I've recommended that you move it there. I'm trying to avoid this. I want to make sure that this is not what happens to you, right? So you notice that if maybe your literature review, for instance, is not adequate enough, sorry about that. If your literature review is not adequate enough, it will be a pass, subject to moderate corrections. Yeah. So maybe if some of the things that you have in your dissertation are not very clear, for instance, where you need additional explanation, then the rating will be a pass subject to moderate corrections. Usually, the beauty with a pass subject to moderate corrections is usually these are things that you can do within maybe a space of 2 weeks or something. I've seen this happen, right? So 2 weeks, 3 weeks, unless if a student decides to just take it easy here, especially that it can be quite stressful after the oral exam, right? What I am trying to avoid is this has happened in our department. I'm trying to avoid D, a resubmit, because a resubmit means you can't graduate, right? And a resubmit will typically mean that the examiners need you to go and collect additional data, additional information, right? Maybe your analysis was very superficial. If you notice here, I don't know if you can notice here, there's points that will hint at the fact that your dissertation is going to be tagged as a resubmission. Is, for instance, you need to collect new primary or secondary data to strengthen your dissertation or something. Can I just pick up a call here and I'll get back to you? Wait, fix it. Can I call you back in the next, I think, 10 minutes? All right, great. Thanks. Right. Sorry about that. So if this is like, and there was a case, I believe it was last year. It was bad, right? It was so bad because the candidate did decide or neglected to collect data from reliable sources or something. So it was a resubmit, unfortunately. So if your analysis is superficial, you notice here reanalysis. If your results section is not detailed enough, for instance, or if your discussion, the interpretation of the findings is not adequate enough, as long as one of the examiners recommends that this is a resubmission, then you go back, right? Again, this is the reason why I keep mentioning. Some of my comments I know may appear as though they are very crude and harsh, but I am trying to avoid this. And really, I'll give you, Mr. Chala, as an example, right? You've been doing this since 2021. That's a long time. We all know, right? But of course, we're a bit biased here because we're involved in this. We know that you've done some really tremendous work. We know this because you've published 2 papers, right? Based on your work so far. It would be such a shame if, when the examiner sent through the reports, they recommend that it be a resubmission, right? Or if your dissertation is written in such a way that you have to rewrite various portions of the dissertation, then it's a resubmit. And you notice here that you're given about 6 months, right, for re-examination. So the thing with a resubmission, unfortunately, is even if you finish within 1 month, because a resubmission means that a board of examiners would have to be reconstituted, right? And that takes a lot of time, right? So usually they'll plan to do this within 6 months or something. And again, it would be sad for you because you would have to wait until after next year for you to graduate. In certain rare instances, we don't do this in the department, but we have a situation where if what the student has produced is just so bad, right, that the 3 examiners feel that it's not at the level of a master's, then they'll award you a postgraduate diploma. So you would have failed here. Your dissertation has not attained master's level scholarship. And this is the reason why, again, I think I've done this for Ms. Kasonde, right? I've mentioned explicitly to say this is not at the level of a master's degree. Again, the reason I'm doing that is I'm trying to avoid a situation where they'll tag your dissertation as being associated with just a postgraduate diploma, right? I've never in the 5 or 6 years I've been at UNS, I've never encountered an F here where it's an outright fail. Usually an outright fail is, it usually comes up when a student maybe is working in isolation. So they've been assigned a supervisor, but they never really had, any sort of meaningful interactions with a supervisor, right? So as a result, you do things that really have nothing to do perhaps with the problem that was addressed here. So in terms of the examination process, that's point number one. That's that, right? I don't know if there are any thoughts or questions here, but or maybe we can leave them towards the end. I've touched on some aspects of two as well. You notice that in two, it's just what you're supposed to be. What you're supposed to, and I see Miss Tembo has joined us, but we've touched on what I feel is very important for her, especially, right? Because I think she's supposed to be submitting in the next, I hope in the next coming days here. We've had a bit of back and forth, myself and her other, her co-supervisor, Professor Kandelwa here. But we all feel that she's really done all that needs to be done for her to submit. So she should be submitting here. And I believe, looking at the fact that we're in December, I believe that her oral exam is likely going to be scheduled for perhaps January or even December if possible. Actually, I don't see why this examination can take place in December. But anyways, so Ms. Tembo, we're just going through the classification. We'll share the recording. We're going through the rating of the recommendations that will come through, be expected of the 3 internal examiners, right? So a dissertation will either be recommended to be a pass without any corrections, a pass subject to minor corrections, pass subject to moderate corrections, a resubmission, award for postgraduate diploma, or an outright fail. For most of you, especially for people like Ms. Tembo, Mr. Chisale, and Ms. Kasonde, what we've done, right, when you submitted your work to ETD 2022 and 2023, and in the case of Ms. Tembo, when she submitted her work to Africa in 2023, it's a sign, right? If your work is accepted at such a venue, it's a signal that you've done things that make sense. So in essence, you submitting work to these, conference venues was not just to satisfy the requirements, because for you to graduate, you need to showcase that you can publish, right? It's the reason why I always push students to actually prepare or submit a paper to a publication venue, if you will. But what we're doing again is, because usually your work is subjected to a peer review process. So we are mimicking what's going to happen to your dissertation, but of course at a very high level, because what you're submitting to these conference venues is a summarized version of what you did. So if people, right, if a team of, renowned researchers or peer reviewers hint at the fact that what you submitted makes logical sense, then there's no reason to doubt that you will pass. You will pass this. So the only question to ask here is that, because the dissertation is bulky here, is it going to be a pass without any corrections? Or is it going to be a pass subject to minor corrections, or a pass subject to moderate corrections? Yeah, it's rarely the case that it will be a resubmission if you've published work in those publication venues. And indeed, if we've had a back and forth, right? Anyways, and then in terms of the dissertation or manuscript preparation process, the preparation process, I think for most of you, we've gone through this process where I think it started early. I've recommended that you send through chapters early enough so that there's feedback, right, at various stages. Like we've started with is it the related work or something? But besides that, I think what we've done is, for people like Ms. Tembo, Mr. Chisale, and I think Ms. Kasonde here, you've all, at the bare minimum, you've actually submitted a full or a complete draft version of the dissertation, and I have provided detailed comments on what needs to be looked at. There are some comments that I think you should take very seriously. For some of you, I think I've recommended that you consider having a copy editor look at your work. If you have a friend, or if you have friends that perhaps are in a position to thoroughly go through your work, that's good enough. But after draft number 1, if I made such a comment, it would be in your best interest to just explore the possibility of doing that. Actually, UNZA has UNZA Press. There are people there that have been trained to play the role of copy editors. Just have them go through your work, and I'm sure it shouldn't be that expensive. It's rarely the case that they will do that for free, really. So consider doing that. And then in terms of the dissertation submission process, there's, by the way, again, for dissertation manuscript preparation, there's a very nice section in the guidelines that speaks to preparation, right? You want to look at 10.8 here, right? Oh, sorry, these are guidance for the, sorry, these are for the examiners here. I don't know if there's a preparation process for, yeah, so you want to look at section 26 here. So procedure for preparation of dissertation thesis for master's and doctoral degrees, right? You want to look at this section here. And for most of you, I have made comments. Like if I've noticed that your draft version of the dissertation is not really aligned with these guidelines, like the order of the preliminary pages, and how things like the appendices section are supposed to be structured. I've probably pointed you to this particular section or have made an explicit comment here. So you probably want to go through this here. I mean, it's mostly stuff that I think all of you have adhered to, but it's always nice to refer to this section as you are preparing your dissertation here. All right. And then in terms of submission, I think the only thing to pay particular attention to here is the fact that before you can submit, you want to do what Miss Tembo has obviously done. You have to give notice in writing, intention to submit. So again, details on how you go about submitting are in section 27.1. It turns out that this is a process that initiates comes next, right? The postgraduate coordinator or the MLIS coordinator, in the case of most of you here, will then go out there and identify appropriate people to examine your work. So you have to do this. And I'm looking at people like Mr. Chisari and Ms. Kasonde here. If you haven't done this, I think Ms. Temba has already done this here. Yeah. If you need clarification, you can reach out to IDE or to the MLIS coordinator for details. The reason I put item number 4, publications, this is more aimed at people like Ms. Mchinga, for instance, and Ms. Chama, who have yet to, and I think Ms. Nirenda as well, who have not published anything. I know people like Ms. Chama, and especially Ms. Mchinga, are still, I think they're at a stage where they can literally submit before December. Ms. Mchinga especially, she's done with data collection. She's just busy with writing. It's just that I haven't interacted with her for quite some time here, and I'm worried, right? It would be nice if we had a number of you graduate in May here. So the reason I added this is this will have to be done before May, right? For you to graduate, you need to point at a publication or something that is publishable, something. Yeah. And then, so this doesn't apply to Ms. Tembo and Mr. Chisari and Ms. Kasonde, because you already have publications. I think the only thing I need to emphasize on is that you will need to add. You will notice that the details of what needs to go to into the appendices section. I think there's a part here that. There's a section in the, there we go. So if you look at 26.13.1, says a student shall be encouraged to publish material in advance, right? In advance of the submission of the dissertation or the thesis. If available, reprints of such published material should be appended to the dissertation or thesis. So if you haven't, that's Ms. Achsale, Ms. Kasonde, and Ms. Tembo, if you have not yet added the publication in the appendices section, please do that. It's always nice, right? To indicate these are major accomplishments. It's always nice that the final manuscript has these details here. And then this part here is quite important, right? Academic dishonesty. Not that I'm saying any of you are being dishonest in any way, but it turns out that these examiners, the people that are going to look at your work, will run, and I'm going to use Mr. Chitali and maybe Ms. Kasonde's work as examples. They will run your work through Trinity or through a plagiarism detection piece of software. Now, it would be unfortunate, right? We've had conversations about this, but it would be unfortunate if they realize that your work, like if you look at Ms. Kasonde's similarity index score here, it would be unfortunate if the report indicates that the similarity index is above 10%, right? This is too high. And the reason why you get such results, and the same here applies to people like Mr. Chitali, for instance. I did run Ms. Tembo's a while back when she submitted her initial draft, but I think she has, I hope if you're done with the dissertation, Mr. Kowe, it would be nice if you could again run it through Trinity to make sure that the similarity score is not very high. If you look at Adrian's, for instance, it's 6%. Now, of course, this was very crude here, because if we go up here and try and look at the areas that have been highlighted, some of the areas are things like common text here, right, on the title page. And in the case of Adrian, assuming your work is indexed, which I think it is, right? If we go to Google Scholar, I think the two publications from the EDD conference have already been indexed. I know the most recent two are already on my profile in my case, right? So what Trinity does is to look at it'll be these two here, that would be Ms. Kasonde and Mr. Chitali, right? So if you've already been indexed, what Trinity will think is that you are literally, the content in your dissertation is similar to the things that you've already published. But that's okay if this can be explained. What bottom line really is that we are trying to avoid a situation where you are caught wanting, right? Where somebody raises an issue, an examiner raises an issue to say, why is it that we have chunks of text that have been plagiarized, right? This is the reason why I think early on in the process, I had indicated that you want to avoid these things here. Like if you look at Ms. Kasonde's this thing, the highlighted literature tagged as 3 here, it's clear that she was literally copying word for word here, right, from an existing piece of text. If you look at the thing that's in, I don't know if this is purple here, could be colorblind, but if you look at 3 here, this entire paragraph here that's tagged as 3, I don't know if you can see my screen here, is literally plagiarized. And I'm using the word plagiarized here because you literally got text that already exists in a publication and you're passing it as your own. Please avoid this, right? If we go to 3 here, I don't know if we can find 3 here. Maybe we can't here, but if we, well, I think we can actually. If we go to 3, it even tells us exactly where this resource is coming from, right? If I were you, I would really avoid this because these are the things that will lead to this outcome here that we've been talking about, resubmission. You know, so please pay particular attention to that. If I haven't added you to Trinity, I've added, I think I've added Adrian, I've added Cecilia, I believe I added Ms. Tembo as well. So you should be able to submit your work, your new drafts yourselves to try and check that the similarity score is drastically reduced here. Yeah. So that's that. Then the last item on the agenda is, it's just Q&A session. I hope this interaction was helpful here. I don't know if you have any thoughts or questions about this.
Yes, sir.
Yes. Oh, by the way, I also forgot, as you are doing this, it would be nice if you, I know that the oral exam is only going to be later here, but it would be nice if you, as you're preparing your dissertation, if I were you, alongside preparation of the dissertation, I'll be preparing my presentation slide deck as well. So that you're not doing this at a stage when you've forgotten some of the important things here. But over to you, Mr. Chisali. You wanted to say something?
Yes, yes, sir. I don't think I have access to that software.
To turn it in?
Yes.
I'll try and see if I can do this again, um, but um, I think when I was running this, I added both you and Miss Kasson. So um, you should have gotten email notifications. If you haven't, that's fine. I'll try and see if I can look into this. Worst case scenario is when you're done, you want me to run this on your behalf, I can easily log in and upload your revised manuscript and then just send you this report so that you can make adjustments or something.
Okay.
But the key thing here is you want to avoid these numbers here. There's no, UNZA doesn't provide a threshold to say only dissertations with a similarity index lower than this are the ones that are going to be accepted, because sometimes what you discover is that you can actually justify, right, why there are similarities. And I'm trying to, in instances where perhaps the similarity is coming from a publication that is related to past work in the lab like this, maybe you can justify to say that's the reason or something, or if you were a co-author, right, or on that publication. Yeah. I don't know if there are any other thoughts about this.
Yes, Doc. There is, I think, on my comment,
Yes.
there's one part where I'm not very sure of what you meant. So now
Yes.
I was trying to find an avenue. I think I responded to you, trying to by whatever you by the comment that you gave. So maybe at some point you may also try to check. I've tagged you. Give me further
Yeah.
instructions.
So the thing about comments is, for those of you that feel like there are specific comments that are very unclear and you want us to have a discussion. And I think I had mentioned that before we schedule an ad hoc meeting, it would be nice if you thoroughly go through all the comments so that during our discussion I can clarify what I meant. So if that's what you're referring to, as soon as you're ready, just let me know. We can schedule an interaction. I'm available because I'm on leave, so I'm available, except Monday and Tuesday next week I'm attending the DRGS Seed Money Symposium here. But so we can schedule an interaction Wednesday, Thursday, or maybe Friday next week or something.
Okay, Doc.
Yes.
Thanks so much.
Yes, I'm not sure if there are any other thoughts or comments about this, but
Yes.
just to again, yes.
Yes, Doc. I just wanted clarification. In your earlier communication, you just indicated that we could submit in December. Did Professor Aka probably give a deadline, or it's up to the end of December?
Yeah, so thank you for that. And by the way, if you've been, ideally, you should be able to clarify these things with him, seeing as his MNIS coordinator. But Professor Aka has been unwell. He was actually in hospital. So if you are, he had a stroke, apparently. So if you've been reaching out to him, I want to strongly recommend that you instead go through the head of department, or in your correspondence, you also include the head of department, Mr. Mklama. So, but to answer your question, he had indicated before the end of December. So my interpretation of before the end of December is your intention to submit, and the actual submission of the manuscript should have been, or should be done by, I was going to say the 30th of December, but that's a Saturday, but I'll say the 29th of December, ideally. So it's until the end of the month. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, Doc, thank you.
Yeah, and the reason why that's the case, by the way, is because of this document that I had shared again. Again, if you don't have, I don't know if you people have this document here. It's because of the timeline, right? So graduation is in the week of the 20th of May next year. But between now and May, your manuscript, once submitted, has to be sent to the internal examiners. An oral examination session has to be organized. Yeah. You will have to respond to the issues raised by the internal examiners. All of that takes a long time. So December is I guess what you'd call a safe period that gives you and the department a bit of leeway to make sure that by the time we get to May, you'd have been examined, you'd have done your viva voce, as they call it, or the oral exam, you'd have made corrections in good time for you to graduate in May. Yeah. I don't know if there are any other thoughts or questions about this.
I have a question, Doc.
Oh, yes, Ms. Tembo.
My apologies for joining late.
That's fine.
You didn't add me to the Turnitin. I didn't receive any notification.
Again, I will add you as well. I think the reason you didn't get any notification is because the most recent, it's a new feature actually, the most recent reports I was generating were for Mr. Chisale and Ms. Kasonde actually. So I'll look into this, try and see if we can have your account, you have access to those accounts so that you can do the submissions on your own. Because what typically happens, I remember doing this when I was a graduate student myself, is I found myself resubmitting, my manuscript over and over again. So I submit and I notice that the similarity index is so high. I make adjustments, I make changes until I get to a stage, or I got to a stage where the similarity index score was reasonably low. I think the threshold at my alma mater at that time anyway was is it 10% or something? Yeah. So I'll look into that.
Okay, since UNZA doesn't have a threshold, what would you advise for us?
Well,
unacceptable.
So my advice is when you run this, because you can make adjustments, right? If you notice, I'm going to use Mr. Sale's manuscript, for instance. You notice that part of the reason why he has a similarity score of 29%, part of the reason is, look at this. There's portions of his title that appear somewhere else. That's one thing. But also common text, right? Like on the title page, we expect this to appear on all dissertations at UNZA, right? But what Turnitin thinks is that this is plagiarized content or something. So my advice would be, as you are looking at these reports, you pay particular attention. I'm going to use maybe let's use Ms. Kasonde's as an example. You want to pay particular attention to especially the related work part, right? You want to avoid I don't know where this is here. You want to avoid things like no, okay, this is I like using this as an example because I think what Miss Kasonde did is there we go. She didn't really make a number of changes. This had come up in proposal stage. You want to avoid this, right? Like copying text verbatim is considered academic dishonest, right? It's plagiarism. So you want to be on the lookout when you generate this Turnitin report. You want to be on the lookout on chunks of text which can be mapped onto existing literature or something. And in fact, when you make alterations, so you notice that if Ms. Kasonde, for instance, was to make alterations and resubmit this via Turnitin, what will happen then is this score here will be drastically reduced. So it will probably come down to somewhere around 20% or something. But of course, again, this can be explained also. So if you get to a stage where you are satisfied, even with the 29%, where you can explain why the similarity score is that high, is okay, right? Because during these things will normally come up during the oral exam. That's the time when the internal examiners will get the opportunity to raise red flags about having noticed that content was plagiarized from already existing text. So you can explain to say, well, we submitted a publication, or we have a publication in Africa in 2023, and this is where the content is coming from, because it turns out that the publication is based on this dissertation.
Okay.
So yeah. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, it does.
Okay.
But one more thing, Doc.
Yes.
Dr. Aka being my other supervisor, since Professor Aka rather, since he's not well,
Yes.
what will happen?
Oh no. So the thing is, as long as there's usually when the examination is taking place, if somebody is not available, and it happens more often than people think actually, there's usually what they call a proxy. So somebody to represent him or something. And just to mention that the department is looking into this issue, because this is very important, right? Especially that Professor Candelo is actually the Emily's coordinator. So this issue is being given the seriousness it deserves here. So I'll be around. So ideally, right, the way the examination process works is, actually, I don't really need to be there, because I'm not allowed to say anything in the exam when you're being examined. Only the internal examiners. So they will look for internal examiners, the 3 people that are going to look at your work. And then when the oral exam is organized, those are the people that are going to be raising issues. And you are supposed to defend. This is why it's called a defense, right? You're supposed to defend yourself and provide explanation to issues that will be raised or something. And by the way, there is such a thing as failing the defense as well, because it's an oral exam. So, but more on that later. And in fact, once there's an indication that people have submitted their work, we shall organize rehearsals for you to rehearse your oral exam. A common thing is people go beyond the allocated, is it 10 minutes or something? Really, really sad, right? Like what we had, when was that? Is it, I think you attended those sessions, Miss Tembo. I think I saw you. I don't know if it was you or...
Yes, I did.
Yes, right? People going over time, you're stopped, right? Or people failing to answer questions. And these are questions related to the work that you purport you did, right? For maybe 2 years or 3 years for some of you. You put in so much work, so it's only fair that you properly prepare for this, so that you pass both the defense and so that we minimize the issues raised by examiners in regards to the actual dissertation report. All right. Any other thoughts about this? Okay. If there are no questions, again, it's unfortunate that especially Miss, Mchinga is not around. If there are no questions, just to remind Miss Chairman, Miss Mchinga, that there's still an opportunity for both of you to actually submit your work. It would be nice if we could quickly do this. Thank you very much. And if anything, in case of anything, just let me know, and then we can either schedule a meeting or you can just send me an email or something. Thank you, and enjoy the upcoming weekend.
Thank you.
Yep.